Call the meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. on the 14th of June, 2022. First order of business is review and approval of minutes. Have people reviewed the minutes? Any typos or corrections or anything?
The only thing that I noticed is, Mark Elis, I see you're on the call. What's your address again? There wasn't a number there.
Oh, yeah.
62 Prescott,
62, perfect.
as I recall.
That is correct. Thanks,
Okay,
Stan.
cool. We'll have to
Yeah.
correct that.
Everybody knows where to find you, Mark.
We hear it all the time, it's
That's fine.
Okay. So anybody else? Because I think we can approve the minutes subject to inserting the house number in.
I'll move that we approve the minutes as amended.
Someone second?
Second it.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, all in favor? Phil,
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, so that's done. Chair report. Let's see, I don't have much to report this month. Let's see, I did a couple of sessions on Sudbury Road. A little effort led by Aaron for logging traffic details there, which was really fascinating. My conclusion is the town could fix a lot of problems on its own without a lot of outside help, but collecting real rigorous data might require some outside help. But it's really interesting. The lights are not adjusted very well at all. And the way the train station is set up does not serve the traffic at all. In Waltham, the eastbound train stops after it goes through the crossing, which makes a lot more sense. And the westbound train, again, stops after it goes through the crossing. When you have an eastbound train at Sudbury Road, what happens is the cars are stuck for worst case 4 or 5 minutes if they happen to come just as the light turns red, and then the train comes when the light would normally turn green. It takes quite a while to clear. So I think that's a bit of a mess that was never designed properly, in my opinion. It may just be that the visual sensors for the traffic are too far away from the northbound Sudbury Road traffic. But at any rate, it's an interesting project, very interesting.
And if I can explain just why Nick was doing that, just for context, we're looking to do to submit it for a grant for a bottleneck grant, which would, if we got the grants, help with trying to figure out the Thoreau Depot traffic concerns there, because that's something that was brought to our attention during the Thoreau Depot rezoning that came to town meeting. So that was something that was brought to our attention, and this bottleneck grants would serve in more of a looking at what we can do as opposed to just implementing a project that we've already come up with. So it's a little bit more sort of engineering focused and helping us to look at what our options might be. So we're trying to get some data so that we can look more closely at that and have a better grant to apply with.
Yep. So let's see. Anything else? Anything I skipped, Aaron? Chair
I
report.
think Laura has a question.
Oh, Laura, sorry.
I just wanted to clarify, Aaron, so in terms of what the grant would cover, it would be paying whom to do what exactly? Is it to write a report or to give us designs for different scenarios? Just a little bit more clarity there would be helpful.
Yeah, so it's pretty open. So there's actually some wiggle room there. We haven't actually decided we're gathering data now so that I'm going to help planning and town engineers, and we're going to try to come up with what we should be applying for, because we can't apply for the state to come and take a look at it, but we'd rather have a specific plan in mind and say, we feel that the problem is X. We think that a traffic study would help. We think that doing A, B, or C would help. So we're still trying to sort of work that out, but the grant is really kind of open so that there's different opportunities within it.
Aaron, do you know if the traffic, there are video cameras on the light, up where the lights are. And the video cameras, supposedly decide when to turn, the light should turn green based on the traffic, whatever. Do you know if those record, or are they just used in real time to make decisions on the lights? Because it would be really helpful. If it's possible to record that, we would have some really good information. The problem with collecting data there is that you would need to have, if you're doing it with humans, you need to have at least 4 people on each of the approaches, and they'd need to be synchronized in their collection of the data, which would be extraordinarily difficult without some computer-based system that everyone was networked to. So if they actually do record that, even for a short period, if we can get access to it, that would help. I think right now data collection is a serious problem. We just don't know how bad it is. I mean, I can only tell you how bad it is on Sudbury Road at certain times of the day.
Yeah, I'll look into that and see if engineering knows.
Phil?
So what agency is the grant making agency?
What agency is the grant from?
Yeah,
I believe it's through Mass DOT, but I'd have to go and look at it. I've been working on another grant, so it's not quite in my head right now, but I want to say it's through Mass DOT.
okay.
Okay. There was a question, Merrill?
Nate,
Yes,
Please identify yourself as always.
sure. I'm Merrill Schwartz, 13 Wright Farm. I don't know if I'm actually an official member of this committee, but I've been asked to attend as a representative from the Disability Commission. And we have.
Merrill?
Yes.
Could you just repeat your address again? I'm sorry, I just missed it.
Oh, sure. We've moved to 13 Wright Farm. So
Thanks.
you're welcome. The Disability Commission has really been extremely concerned about the depot for a long time because it's one of the few remaining train stations that is not handicapped accessible. And if there is any way that something could be addressed in this grant, it's really been a big problem for many people. In fact, it came to the attention of the students at the Willard School, and they actually wrote a letter to, I don't know whether they were doing a political action study, but they wrote a letter asking us why that train station was not accessible, which was amazing to us because most people just ignore it as an issue, but it's a huge issue. West Concord does have a handicap ramp and access to the train, but for people who are mobility limited, it's a huge problem. Concord Academy students who take the train, really don't have access to, if there are any limitations in their mobility, really have an issue getting off there. So I'm not sure how it should be addressed, but I think we would like to have some input, into, that whole issue of the train.
Yes, thank you. That's very good. If they were ever going to do anything like move the eastbound platform, that would be the time to do it, do them at the same time. So we might have a couple of problems we could solve with that. Dan?
yeah, 2 things. As far as the count, is that simply a question of counting cars that go by at various times for the
Well,
intersection study?
Partially, it's partially number of cars that we're looking. We're basically just trying to get some basic data at this point. So, when the train comes, how many cars are backing up? Is it the lights that are poorly timed? How many pedestrians do we have walking through the area? How many
Okay.
bicyclists? So just trying to get sort of a baseline, just some information so that we have somewhere to go from instead of just saying, writing to the state and saying, we have a traffic problem. They're going to say, well, so does everybody. So
Yeah.
by having something to point to gives us a stronger case, even if it's, sort of ad hoc data that we're gathering.
Yeah, it's probably aggressive to expect results that would be useful, but I was thinking of those rubber strips that go, the tubes that count cars going by. I don't know how much data they give, and they can probably be obtained from the state.
The problem, the main issue that I was looking at was the complaints are about the traffic backing up, not the count. And the count is, I think, a minor issue there. The real problem, for instance, is if you get 10 cars backed up at a red light heading northbound on Sudbury Road, I almost guarantee you the last car or two will not clear. And I had one instance where 2 cars ran a red light to get through.
Yeah.
And they still didn't all clear. And it's just, that's the sort of thing that you pick up if you're just sort of casually looking at that intersection.
Yeah. Okay. The other question I had was, who was actually responsible for the design of the depot? Is that the T or is that Concord?
You mean the
think
the train station part?
Yeah.
The
The
T is
actual
be
train
responsible for
station's
the
the
actual
MBTA.
train
Yeah.
station.
So we can
I mean,
come
for
up
the
with
boarding and for the passengers getting on and off
Right.
the train, that's the T's
But
responsibility.
in terms of Merrill's questions about, the issues with accessibility, getting them on this, I mean, is that something that's already, I'm assuming they have some involvement already?
Oh, absolutely. We had applied, we had reached out to them years ago, and apparently we were put on the bottom of the list. There have been several, stations that have been, sort of updated, but we never made it to the top of the list. But this has been going on for years. This is not a new issue, but it's definitely in the T's hands to make a change. So
Yeah.
at the least, we would like we would like to reinitiate a lot of support in approaching the T and asking them once again to get on with their required.
Well, it might be that something from the select board would be more, have more of an attention getting than from a committee in town. So that might be
Right.
something to work together on for our committee and the Disabilities Commission to bring something together. And we would certainly support that. And if you've been working this
Great.
issue, you've doubtless articulated the need. And if you want to dust that off and pass it by us, we would be happy to forward it to the
Okay.
select board with our endorsement.
Terrific. We will work on that. Thank you.
Okay, let's see.
Meryl, I have a question for you. In your advocacy with regard to this in the past, have either the Disabilities Commission or maybe perhaps selectmen reached out to the legislative delegation to ask them for some assistance with the agency? Do you have any idea?
I'm not certain that we have gone that route. It probably would need to be, well, it could be done on many levels. It could be done through the selectmen, select board, or perhaps through, to reach out to the legislators. But it's certainly, certainly something that, could perhaps be, worked on. That's a good point. If we ask, the town as a whole to try to come up with some new ideas about who to contact, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
will pursue that. Thank you. We'll get back to you.
Let's see, review of transport, Laura, did you have something before we get on to?
Just very quickly, I just a quick follow-up question about this grant. Is there any way that we could have, I mean, I know that the MBTA has a different funding structure and a different sort of project prioritization structure than the town does, but is there any way for the grant to produce something that would help hasten the process of getting a redesign for multiple purposes? Because I think about like a letter from the select board that's co-signed by the Disability Commission, the Transportation Advisory Committee, the Climate Action Advisory Board, it serves so many functions, having a more accessible and more useful transit center in Concord. So I just wonder if this grant, if it took a holistic approach to the area, looking at the public transportation accessibility issue, looking at safe bicycle crossing for school kids trying to get to the high school, looking at, wheelchair access on all of those, corners and crossings. So I just wanted to voice that as we go into that grant writing. If it takes a very multimodal approach, it will hit lots of different committees and lots of different purposes in town.
Sounds great.
So
Okay.
this specific grant, it says that the eligible projects for this year are traffic signal retiming, traffic signal controller and cabinet upgrades, traffic signal priority equipment, vehicle detection, install, repair, replacement, and coordination of traffic signals. So the
Oh, that
MBTA
sounds like that's the heart of what our problem is. That's great.
but it wouldn't touch the MBTA. However, that is something that is, on my radar as I look for grants and other things. That's definitely something that I'm looking for, because I know that is a concern, not only for the Disability Commission, but for many in town.
Okay, let's move on to review of transportation options in
We
Concord.
have to, you skip number 4.
Introduction. Josh isn't here, is he? He
Oh,
wasn't.
okay.
So while Josh, our newest member, isn't here, if I could take the moment to introduce another Josh who's on the call.
Sure.
So Josh is our UNH Sustainability Fellow, who, fortunate for transportation and mobility and the Transportation Advisory Committee, is coming to work with us now to do some projects involving some focus around sustainability and transportation and sort of transportation communications, looking at how we can get the word out about different ways that you can get around Concord, how to tell people about the bike share, how to tell people about the pilot trolley, how to maybe figure out some wayfinding, some things like that. So Josh is our fellow, and we're very excited to have him. It's unfortunate that he ended up with me, because that means that our sustainability director is leaving. However, we are very excited to have Josh on board and working on transportation under planning.
Great, welcome. Very
Thank you so
happy to
much
have you.
thank you so much for the welcome in. We're very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to continuing working with all of you and contributing to all of the efforts that we want to carry on in Concord.
Yes, I think communication is really important for what we're trying to do. So that's going to be very good. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, then review of transportation options in Concord. Is that where we were last meeting, Laura, with the great work you had done in pulling together sort of almost a directory of everything that's out there?
Yes, unfortunately, I didn't do much work since then, but I do have a few bits of update and a few questions that have come up since then. The first thing is that I flagged that there was no covered bicycle parking at the West Concord train station. And lo and behold, a week later, they installed covered bicycle parking at the West Concord train station, which is quite
I heard
possibly,
you.
quite possibly the most beautiful covered bike parking I've ever seen at an MBTA station. And I honestly wanted to know who was responsible for that. Was that an MBTA project? Was that a Town of Concord project? There's nothing that indicates who built that. And Erin, do you know?
So I don't know specifically. I do know that Marcia Rasmussen, our Director of Planning and Land Management, was working on, she had a grant from, I think it was last year or the year before, they got extended because of the pandemic. And one of the things that it was covering, oh yeah, look at that. One of the things that it was covering was covered bike parking. And I know that it was supposed to be close to the Bruce Freeman so that people could use it and park their bikes afterwards without getting wet. So this might be because of that, or it could be separate, but either way, I'm glad to see it.
That's neat.
It's a thing of beauty. It was shocking to see it and very exciting. The other major question that's come up for me is in terms of how we're using this document and how we're using this information is the Yankee Line bus in particular. I didn't want to reach out to anybody without finding out who I should reach out to and sort of what the chain of command for reaching out to people is. But I wanted to find out more about the Yankee Line bus service. I know that it's operated by Yankee Line, but I believe it's a public-private partnership. And I just would like to be able to get more information about it so we could answer more questions about it. Erin, do you have any suggestions of where to go for more information about that?
So as far as I know, it's not a partnership with the town, because when we've discussed it, we say that there's no public transit that comes to Concord. So it could be that they have, because they stop in Crosby's, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, and it goes from Acton to Concord to Copley Square. And I've read something about it being a public-private partnership with the state. I don't know if it's with the MBTA or some other transit agency.
That could be. I'm not sure. I can help you look into that though. If you want to send me an email, we can sort of dig into that.
Yeah. And in part, I guess one of my reasons for wanting to understand more about it is that it is such an underutilized service in the town. Almost nobody knows about it. And I know this because I know somebody who rides it and he says sometimes it goes into town with 5 people on it. Which I know that we're way down on public transit since the pandemic started, but that for something to go straight from Concord to Copley Square and have 5 people on a coach bus is a shame, because we know a lot of people commute to Back Bay. So I'd love to figure out if there are ways that we as the Transportation Advisory Committee or as a town could be doing a better job of getting the word out there about it. My husband and I have always called it the secret bus because it's a secret that nobody knows about. And I'd love to make it not a secret around town.
Indeed. Yeah, there's not much on their website. It's interesting. So $12 for a trip to Boston.
And 10 if you buy a book.
Yeah.
So for a regular commuter, it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, when you consider the cost of parking, absolutely.
Where do you get the schedule? Where and how do you even hear about it? Publicity in this town's really a problem.
Well, yeah, that's what we worked on the last meeting. Laura's been working on a project, Merrill, trying to come up with a place to document all of this so that the residents will know what's available. It was shocking, just as she was presenting things to us last time, lots of us didn't know about a lot that's available, or have questions that are unanswered. So it's a very valuable project. So, okay.
So I guess well, just to close this out, I will continue working on this document. I'll pull it together a little bit more. Perhaps Erin, you and I could maybe set a time to look at it together and you can help point me in the direction of more work that needs to be done. And then, obviously I think it should go on the town website, but I'd like to explore other opportunities for how we might use this information, because I'm not sure how many people use the town website for this kind of stuff. So,
one thing we could look at is distancing it from the town actually, and having a separate website just for transportation. It might be a lot easier than trying to graft it into the town's website, because my observation is the town's website is like every other town's website. I guess they all buy from the same vendor. And so therefore it's probably not easy to graft in interesting changes. So, I give you an example. When I had a business location in Harvard Square, I joined the Harvard Square Business Association. And someone in that organization 30 years ago or 20 years ago decided to get the domain name harvardsquare.com. And it turns out the Harvard Square Business Association has this site, and that's where tourists, everybody winds up going to find out what's around, how to get around, what the services are. It's amazing. You should check it out sometime. But I can imagine something like that that's not part of the town government, that maybe the Economic Vitality Committee would be interested in working with us on that.
Well, that actually just gave me a great idea. We may not have to have a new site. We could just maybe connect with Living Concord, which is a pretty great resource for visitors to the town. And if we had a comprehensive set of, a comprehensive list of transit options, we could also plan on distributing the final version to, like, we could build a list of like hotels, different businesses, different schools, anybody who might have either visitors or employees or anybody kind of new to town looking for that kind of information, and have it widely distributed and getting it on other people's websites. So it's not just the town of Concord's website that has that information.
Yeah, one thing that I'm working on is slowly trying to build in some of those things into the town's website, because some of them were there before, but they weren't easy to find. And so I've been trying to find different ways to do that. That's one of the things that Josh is going to be helping with. He started to go through and say, well, you can find the parking information, but it takes a while to get there and you have to do a lot of searching. So trying to come up with some of those places where information already is, and trying to make it easier to find, linking between the Visit Concord website, which is the Concord Tourism, and the town's website. Making those partnerships with Living Concord. And there is a welcome packet that we have put together that has all the school listings and has where to get, if you need to figure out how to get trash or water or anything like that, where to go for all those different types of things that we send out to the different real estate agents. So there's different places that we can work on putting things together and make sure that the information is getting out there once it's all pulled together.
Yeah, so given what you said, Josh Arroyo is going to be working on this summer, it sounds like connecting up with Laura's work would be beneficial. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Related committees and overlap discussion. So are you able to make any progress on that, Erin? On sort of.
So I have it the same place that we left it before, Nick.
Okay.
Do you want to share that for now, or do you want to keep working on it?
We can share it. Go ahead. You got it? Yep.
Hold on.
Okay, yeah, so this was just a first shot at maybe a way of indicating on the left what the different commissions, committees, organizations, mostly in Concord, maybe some outside things like Metropolitan Area Planning Council representative, and then a general needs survey, discovering what our overlap is with these different committees and commissions in town. And had questions about some, like capital planning task force. Is that still active? It's something we would be very interested in for capital planning for transportation projects. So these are just my comments that I came up with when I went through all the committees that seemed like they had some overlap or some intersection with what we're working on. So
I also went in and added some notes, like for instance, you mentioned the capital planning task force. They are no longer active, so I put a note here saying no. But so there's some additional things in here too that, like for instance, with the agriculture committee, what are the needs of farm workers, or is it transit to farm stands that we're looking for? What are the sort of the things that might be needed and might be gathered in that general needs survey.
Yeah, one of the things the Agriculture Committee had that came up in the long-range plan was the need for worker housing. That's a real serious problem for them. And transportation would have to be part of that, I assume. So anyway, so this is what we have so far. It's just, try to get the ball rolling. We could prioritize these. I mean, maybe what we should do for the next meeting, if you want to, everyone wants to vote on what they think are the, sort of rank these, maybe what are the top tier ones that are the most important. I think some of them, I would go back to do that myself. I would go back and look at what the values were, the goals that were in the Envision Concord, things like sustainability, having a positive impact on transportation through sustainable transportation, or equity, and just finding what committees we overlap with, where we have alignment in those values. So things like sustainability and disability commission, there are some that are obviously just embedded in what we're supposed to be working on. But
Is the Affordable Housing Committee on here? I wasn't sure if I saw it. Ah, got it. See it.
Oh, yes, there it is.
Where? Oh, yeah.
okay.
So,
Any thoughts on this? Comments?
so what is your thinking as an action item for committee members on this next?
Well, I think what we need to do is decide, we can't do everything at once. I think we need to decide that there are 2 or 3 that are going to be, that it's important for us to get almost operationally connected to. Let me use sustainability as an example. I think that we have a lot of goal alignment with sustainability, and that we could have an effective alliance by working with them in terms of articulating why it is we need certain modalities of transportation in Concord, or certain improvements, or certain services that aren't available today. So, that's my thought on one way of looking at this and trying to choose committees or commissions to work with. So, I mean, we can just look this over, everyone could look at this. Aaron could send this out to everyone and look at it for the next meeting. We'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. And please come back to the next meeting with what your thoughts are on what do you think are the 2 or 3 most important ones for us to connect to. And in my mind, one of the important parameters is a political parameter, which is that it's clear that when you go to the select board, the more you've connected with other committees and gotten support from other committees, the more clearly they're going to hear you, and the more likely they are to agree with what you're asking them to do. So I think that component is very, very important. Okay. So maybe if you could do that and send it out as a work assignment, Aaron, that would be great for
Well
the
done.
next meeting. Okay. Transportation study. Is that the Sudbury Road thing, the road depot, or?
No, you want to talk about the sort of broad transportation overlook. A comprehensive transportation study for the town.
Oh, okay.
So, which is a very lofty topic.
Yeah. To tell you the truth, I've lost my thoughts on that one. I'm going to have to go back and look at my notes, partly because I've gotten distracted by something else that isn't directly related to this, which is the issue of funding and how we can come up with funding that isn't just from the tax base, but other ways of getting seed money to get some projects started. So let's you and I talk about this offline, Aaron, and see how we want to combine those and what we want to do. I mean, what I'm trying to do is is give us an overall, we came up with a roadmap. Now the question is, what do we need underneath it? What do we need for real, a framework, a real substantive analysis of what we should do and why, some rationale. Okay, so some good news. The trolley pilot project
Nick, it
update.
looked like Phil had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Phil.
Yeah, so before we leave this subject, maybe we can ask Terry if she can give us an update regarding the engaging a transportation planner. Because it seems to me if we're going to have a study, having either a staff person or a contractor or whatever the select board's and the town manager's idea is on board and taking the lead might be helpful in that regard. So what's up, Terry? How are you?
Hi. I do know that in the fiscal year that starts July 1, we have funded a half-time transportation planner. And my understanding is that Erin is going to be applying for the position and has a very good chance of getting the position. And then for the other half of the position, I'm not sure if it's going to be funded by something like the ARPA funds, or we're going to have a consultant to help us shape things for a while for the other half. I don't know if that's been determined yet. Do you know, Erin?
I don't know. I think that things are still very much up in the air and they're still trying to figure out how everything's going to work. I know
Right.
that sort of shifting more of my focus towards doing more transportation work, but that's sort of as much as has been talked about at this point.
Right. And also related to this, the comprehensive transportation study, Nick, that was the biggest suggestion that came out of the meeting that we had in March with the select board, where the transportation committee presented what you've done so far. And the select board wasn't sure what to do, but it seemed that Alan Cathcart was really pushing for this comprehensive transportation study, and Linda Escobedo on the board picked up on that, and so did Carrie. And I think things are underway now, which kind of ties into another comment I was going to make about your capital plan question. There is no more capital plan committee, but there's a process. And it's very important that the transportation committee get on board with that process, because it starts in September. There are a series of 3 meetings. And the first meeting is a joint meeting between the select board and the school committee. And then there's 2 other meetings. And basically in these 3 meetings, that's how the town will evolve the 5-year capital plan every year. And I think that the transportation committee really wants to be on that plan in various.
Right. I think the way we've been looking at that is to supporting Alan Cathcart and in his particular needs in terms of capital. And that is our first priority. Because the truth is there are other things, other services we'd like the ride services, but we don't have enough of, we don't have a plan. I mean, we're far from having something we could ask anyone to fund.
Right, right. And speaking of Alan Cathcart, one more thing while I have the floor. He has specifically asked for this committee's input on a project they're working on right now, the Hubbard Street Complete Streets project. I don't know all the details, but they're having some issues about where to put the striping and how to talk with the neighborhood. And what they want to know is, can your committee come up with some kind of rules or process or priorities about how complete streets are supposed to work. So it's a very big order, but
I'll talk to Alan about it, but I think that's far beyond our capabilities to come up with pavement markings.
So.
no,
one of the-
not pavement markings, just priorities. How do you guys see the complete streets
Okay.
program?
So another way to put it is that we say that the complete streets policy that we have in town is very broad and says that we should, so we need to sort of come up with perhaps best practices or things that we'd like to see happening in the town. Like for instance, wherever possible, have dedicated bike lanes instead of having, things like that. So sort of best practices and things that we'd like to see and to sort of guide the process. Because right now it basically just says that the complete streets should be done according to the community's needs and desires, something very broad like that. So they're looking for some more specifics that they can point to and say, if it's possible, we should be doing A, B, and C. If you can't do A, then B is the next best option, things like that.
Okay, it sounds like you, Aaron, are you meeting with Alan or? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'd like to talk to him too. So let's, I'll contact him as well. And then if there are going to be any meetings, I'd love to be involved in them on that topic, especially. Laura?
So just to clarify, so we don't have, like, through the complete streets process, we didn't develop any things like preferences in terms of designs. There was nothing that was sort of, so it's, okay. And so there wasn't a process for collecting from the community, like what the priorities are when it comes to complete streets?
So there was a process to gather the priorities. However, we took another look at it and nobody who developed it is still with the town. So we're kind of looking at it with a fresh perspective. And we've noticed that a lot of the projects are sort of scattered. They're not necessarily connected. And, one of the things you'd like to see with complete streets is that there's that connectivity. So you're not getting to the end of a bike lane and then just hitting, Route 2. That there's some sort of, connections and points that are continuing on, and that wasn't really taken into consideration when making the priority list. And so looking at that complete streets priority list and sort of figuring out where are the connections between these. If we got funding to do street number, street A, should we be looking at street B and not street Z?
I understand that the prioritization plan was confusing and disjointed. I was actually talking more about design preferences, because there are sort of standard things for if you want to calm traffic or make pedestrian crossing safer, you would use bump outs, you would use, there are just a variety of design best practices. Has the town, Phil might have something to elaborate on this.
Well, actually, this is where I met Nick. There was a complete streets process that was undertaken by the town. It was undertaken, I think, by DPW. When was that, Nick? 5 years ago now?
More than that.
Yeah.
So, there was a series of meetings. The consultants came in and explained the idea of a complete street. And as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking that maybe it would be a good idea for us to go back to basics with respect to folks who live on Hubbard Street and just go through some of the same steps the consultant did in trying to introduce the topic. Because I'm not sure if that actually occurred in connection with the most recent construction activity or, discussions with the neighbors. My sense is that it didn't occur, and maybe we could be a forum for people to come in and have the opportunity to hear someone talk about, this is what a complete street is, just like Laura said, this is why complete streets is something that the, government agencies from the federal government down to us are encouraging. This is how you implement it. Here are, 2 or 3 approaches that you might do to create a complete street. I'm imagining that a lot of people are not aware of, the larger framework, and maybe we can provide a forum for people to become apprised of what sort of standard operating procedure everywhere else.
Right, I think that's what Alan is looking for, and obviously you're not going to be able to do it real quickly. But my understanding is when this was done 7 or 8 years ago, the way they chose the streets was what they were going to dig up anyway. And then they thought, oh, good, we're going to dig up Hubbard Street anyway, we'll put that one on the list. And I don't remember anything about any kind of public forums where it was explained to the public what complete street is, getting people's priorities and all of that. And I think that really needs to be done. And it could be one of the capital projects, this whole comprehensive transportation study. And one of the huge components is complete streets.
Well, one of the things we did when in our roadmap discussion to the select board, we did specifically talk about complete streets, and our vision was to do a complete streets design of great length. For instance, all the way from the Bedford town line to West Concord would be an example. And my thought on what would be is that have a consultant, because we don't have the staff to do that, but to have a consultant organize a project and tap the expertise to place before the town the possibilities for how you would redesign a corridor of that length with the constraints that we have in Concord. And then you have something tangible to discuss with people in the neighborhoods and with the select board and everyone to get a sense of what support there is for it, and to see how it fits with the sustainability and disability goals of the town. So, I mean, I think, frankly, I think going one neighborhood at a time, it's important to talk to the neighbors, for instance, on Hubbard Street, but I don't want the neighbors designing complete streets. I want the town designing complete streets philosophy. The town should have guidelines that the residents in general think are reasonable and acceptable. And that's the way we're going to design a corridor when we do a corridor. That's my thought. So there's an interplay between citizen input and, design and what works. And one of my fears is that, are you aware of what's happening in Cambridge now with the bicycle redesign in Porter Square?
Yeah.
The merchants are suing the city.
Oh.
Okay. In my opinion, they have a good chance of getting heard because some of them claim they're being put out of business by some of the redesigns for complete streets that have been done by Cambridge so far. And some of them are pretty extreme. So anyway, I think it's a very sensitive subject. You can see it through the merchants' reaction to parking issues. Parking is a big part of complete streets design. And that's what the fight in Cambridge is about.
Well, it's also about preventing death of pedestrians and cyclists. So let's not forget the other side of the reason why we need protected bike lanes.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But there are two sides, and you're going to get resistance. So you've got to be very careful in how you solicit the citizens' input and how you take it into account on both sides, right? So that you don't wind up with a lawsuit
So
from
Nick,
one side.
what I would suggest is the Hubbard Streets, Complete Streets project. It was started before Alan, before Steve Dukran, before anybody was on board. And so they were handed this project that I don't think was necessarily handled correctly from the get-go. So I think that maybe we can see if we can invite Alan to our next meeting and he can sort of explain, what's going on, and we could have a discussion about that, and you guys could hear a little bit more about what his thoughts are and how he'd like to see, the TAC working with engineering and with planning to come up with a list of sort of best practices for complete streets, because I don't think that it was really explained to the Hubbard Street community what complete streets is and what was required of them by the town accepting the funds for complete streets. So now we're kind of working backwards and trying to, put Band-Aids on the dam before it breaks, and trying to make sure that everything works out.
Right.
Okay, sort of a do no harm approach. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, do you want to get into the trolley pilot project update then?
Sure.
So I guess action items, you're going to connect with, and I are both going to connect with Alan. I want to talk to him about the capital planning and about the complete streets. So we'll probably see each other at meetings. Thank you.
And just to clarify, is Alan Cathcart coming to our next meeting?
I can invite him and see if he can come.
I think it would be really great for us to have a more robust conversation about how we move forward with complete streets. I would love to hear from Alan about where he feels like his department is on, do they have any best practices in place that they are recommending? I'd just like to know from the town's perspective what the next step needs to be in terms of getting sort of all projects moving forward.
Yeah.
Is complete streets, I can't imagine that we're operating in a vacuum as far as that goes. Are there not certain basic tenets involved with the whole concept of complete streets that we don't have to reinvent the wheel?
Yes,
Of
absolutely.
course there is. And this is a concept that's been in place for a decade.
Right. I mean, so
the idea that our staff is unclear is a concern. And I think Laura is right. I think we need to be clear about where Alan would like to go, how we can support him, how we can make this happen. But we're not, the thing about complete streets is go to Acton. You want to see what a complete street is, take a drive to Central Street. Okay. If you want to see what a complete street is, drive over to Lexington. This is not rocket science. And for whatever reason, that the idea of this seems not to have come into our staff and been handled clearly. So my sense is that I just want to go back and make a comment about what Nick related as far as the city of Cambridge is concerned. The city of Cambridge has excellent pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. The fact that there are a couple of merchants who are loudmouths who want to hire a lawyer to bring the city to court is true. There's no question about it. But that doesn't mean a judge is going to say anything but, ladies and gentlemen, the city of Cambridge has made a decision. They are involved with public safety, and that's it. I mean, if we're going to, run things because we're afraid that somebody is going to crab, we're not going to get anything done, because people will always crab. It is in the nature of the way things are.
But the point about Cambridge, frankly, the redesign on the northern part of Mass Ave has been maybe wonderful for bicyclists and pedestrians, but it's been at great expense to the auto. And, drivers into Cambridge are really challenged right now on Mass Ave. So, I mean, there are multiple sides to this. And the merchants who are complaining about their lost revenue, that's a legitimate concern that they have. So, everybody kind of has to work together on this thing. And it sounds like they have some legitimate gripes. It's wonderful now riding a bike through Cambridge is great now. It's a lot better than it was several years ago.
It's a lot better than it was. It's a lot safer.
Driving through Cambridge is a nightmare. So, it has to be balanced. Hubbard Street
I think it was a nightmare, Nick, before Dan, before the roads were restriped. it was always a nightmare in the last 30 years. So,
I just want to bring us back. We're not Cambridge. Fortunately, we don't have to solve Cambridge's issue. I do think it's a worthwhile discussion to say we need to involve all the stakeholders and have real honest conversations about what we want. But as we've said before in meetings, like we're here in large part to talk about safety. And there have been some really horrendous deaths of children in the last 2 weeks. So I'm a little touchy about this right now. There was just a 3-year-old killed in New York because somebody was parked in a bike lane. So just like, I think that it would be great for us as a committee to become more educated on what does it mean to have a complete streets, because there are some design guidelines that are best practices that everybody's following. And if the town staff are unclear about what those design guidelines are, maybe there needs to be a joint training for staff, for committee members, for all of us, so we can have a more informed discussion about what does it mean for us to implement complete streets as a community.
That's a terrific idea.
So I just want to jump in, and it's not that the town staff don't understand what complete streets are or what the best practices are. It's that the actual grant funding does not say you have, it says you should be adhering to complete streets best practices as laid out by the town, or as in the town's complete streets policy. And because we don't have a tight policy, that's where the issue is, that we don't have something specific to point to. Because when we said, well, it's in the complete streets policy, and they said, well, the complete streets policy just says it's up to the community. And, so there's this back and forth. And so that's where the real issue is. But I think that having Alan and maybe Steve Duker in here could be a good conversation to have, and to really sort of dig into how we can move forward and make sure that we're using the complete streets funding to something that is going to be beneficial to the community as well as to the Hubbard Street.
Let me bring up, just to keep flogging this, let me bring up what I think is a very fundamental issue, which is the trade-off between automobile parking and street use by bicycles and pedestrians. So, for instance, it might be useful to have a policy, a complete streets policy in town that said that streets of a certain type, let's say Hubbard Street, will have parking for one lane of traffic, one on one side of the street or the other, or alternate, however you're going to do it. But, it's not necessarily our goal. We're definitely not going to have parking on both sides of the street. So that would be a design principle. And it's an important one because that fundamentally says how much real estate you get for bicycles and pedestrians and cars for moving through the area. Unless you can answer that question, I don't know what you have. You have chaos, because what are you going to do? Put a bump out here and narrow the lanes there? Or, the fundamental issue, I think, this parking issue in Cambridge is a huge issue, especially with the business community and with residents. So I think you have to have principles like that say, what are we going to do about parking? That might be the single most contentious issue when it comes to complete streets, in my opinion.
So trolley update?
Oh, yeah.
So last night, yes, it's Tuesday. So last night, the select board voted to support the pilot project for the shuttle, the trolley. So we are working hard to get that started quickly. It changed slightly in that we added a stop in West Concord twice a day at 11 a.m., around 11 a.m. and around 1 p.m. Of course, subject to traffic and how quickly the trolley's moving. But the idea is that while we can't have a separate West Concord loop right now, especially since Commonwealth Ave from Beharrell to what's at the end? I'm blanking on the street name, is going to be under construction for most of the summer. So it seemed like a bad time to try to pilot a trolley that would be going and doing a loop in West Concord. It would be constantly running into construction traffic. So it's going to have a stop in West Concord twice a day so that people can come and they can shop and they can get lunch. If they choose to stay longer, they can always take the train back to Concord Center, or they can go back to wherever their destination was. Or they can hop back on the trolley at 1 p.m. and be brought back to Concord Center to continue doing the historic sites, or to get back to their bike, their train, their car, whatever method they came to Concord in. So we're really excited that the select board voted to support this. We also got support from the business partnership, from the Chamber of Commerce, from the Economic Vitality Committee, the Sustainability Division, and many of the different shops in town. So we're really excited that we're going to be able to put this together and hopefully get it started in the next week or so. We're working hard to get done quickly.
Great, very good. So is that something Josh Arroyo would help us with in publicizing this?
Yeah, so Josh is going to be helping doing a little bit of the publicity, trying to figure out how to get it out to Concord. Beth Williams is working a little bit doing some of the marketing for the Visitor Bureau, and working with, we're a member of the Massachusetts or Boston Concierge Association. And so we can get rack cards and information into all the different hotels in Boston. So hopefully we'll be able to bring people out that way. A couple different marketing techniques like that she's working with her partners on. But yeah, we're excited.
Great. Okay. Okay, great. Shared Streets grant update.
That's me too. So we applied a couple months ago for a Shared Streets grant. That's one that you all saw the survey for, that had all the different types of pavement in Concord Center. So we did get funding for that. So the idea is to create a more pedestrian safety focused, but also historically looking downtown crossing at Main Street in Walden. So the idea is to put stamped pavement in so that it looks a little bit different, and that causes cars to slow down. And this is something that's been used in many different locations. We're also looking at and working with the Historic Districts Commission on putting in some bump outs so that it's easier to see around cars, so that it's much more safe for pedestrians and for people who are trying to get around Concord Center, because that's one of our, when we asked the police where their safety concerns were in our town centers, that was one that was flagged. And that was the application that was chosen. We submitted 2 different ones. The other one, I'm bummed didn't get picked, but I'm really excited about this Maine and Walden proposal as well. It sounds very interesting, and we're really excited to see where it can go. We're also looking to put in some planters to help with stormwater management and things like that. So really excited, and hopefully we'll get moving on that quickly as well.
So those bump outs would be like at the crosswalks? That's what, okay, yeah. So that the pedestrian has a protected space that's physically protected by the curbing.
Right, yeah, so they could step out and they could see more clearly without actually being in the streets. If there's a car coming, then the car can also see them. We want to stay away from, because it is a historic area, stay away from the big flashing signs that say, there's a pedestrian here. Because we knew that the Historic Districts Commission would not be okay with that, but something like the bump outs, they might be more okay with, and the pavement, the stamped pavement, because that alerts you that you're coming to something that's a little bit different, because the pavement has changed.
Would the bump outs have wheelchair ramps?
Have wheelchair, it'll be
Ramp.
ADA accessible, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no net loss of parking spaces?
I don't
Karen?
know. I think that where it is it's wide enough that you don't have to. I think they're pretty strategically, the crosswalks are pretty strategically placed, that there's no crosswalks directly next to them. There might be a shifting and maybe a loss of one or two, but I'd have to check with the town engineer and see. I know that we're going to have to look at working with a design firm to make sure that we're adhering to everything, because they work on these projects day in and day out, and they know all the different parameters and things that are needed and safety concerns.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? No. Okay, liaison observer comments. Terry, anything in particular?
Well, first of all, I'm very excited to be attending your meetings. And are you going to be meeting on Tuesdays from now on, probably? Instead of
Yes, second Tuesday.
Yay. You know, I hated being out of touch because you guys are really getting a lot done. So that's great. And Nick, I really like that project you were working on with the traffic counts. I think you're really on to something with that.
It's Aaron's project. I'm just out there doing tallies.
All right, Aaron and Nick, I think you're on to something. When you say the traffic light is not synchronized right, and the train, it's not synchronized with the train, and there's a lot that we can do without hiring a consultant. I completely agree. And I'm wondering if maybe when Alan comes in or offline, we could do it or whatever, but I really think you're on to something.
Do you know who actually in town, who's responsible for the programming of the traffic lights? Is it the Public Works or the Police Department, or?
It's
Does
the
nobody
Public
know?
Works.
It's public.
And I think it will be Steve Dukran who is going to know how it works and who to talk to.
Okay, I'm going to reach out to them. I just need
That
to-
would just be
more about-
really, really good.
Is that counting still going on?
If you want to go out there, please do. I'm always
Well,
looking
if
for data.
I mean, if there's some parameters of what you need, I can try and do that.
Yeah, I
Me
can.
too. I'll do it too. Yeah.
I find, yeah, I think just go out and identify what you think are the problems and collect some data. You know, for instance, my thing was for decades, ever since they redesigned that intersection, I've been frustrated by the traffic backup on Sudbury Road
Right.
and a couple of other things. So my hot button was the traffic backup on Sudbury Road. So I went there to count that and to quantify it and to come away with some numbers so that I understood what the issues were. So if you've got issues like, you know, I don't know what they might be, pedestrian access, bicycles, you know,
No,
go
no,
out there.
my issue is that it never clears, like you're saying, and it has to do with the train is just sitting in the station. And the traffic can be going then. It's only when the train starts moving.
Yeah, so that's an issue. But the point is that there are a lot of issues at that intersection. And, you know, whether it's bicycles or pedestrians or whatever your issue is, go out and collect data about it, bring it back, and let's
All
chew
right.
on it. I think this is
Okay.
really instructive.
So one thing that I will say is that the grant is due June 30th. So anything that you collect before then is useful for the grant. Anything else is useful for our information or for your own edification.
Yeah, and you might check the MBTA schedules because that will affect you. I discovered, for instance, non-rush hour, the trains run once an hour. The eastbound, I may have this not exactly right, but first an westbound train comes through at about 9:15, 10:15, 11:15, 12:15, and then an eastbound train comes through about 5 minutes later. And that's really, it's a great time to be there. But also go there when there aren't any trains, okay?
Yep.
Or go there in rush hour where the trains come much more frequently and see what happens.
Right. So I just had a few other comments. You guys are correct about the MBTA that we have reached out in the past. And they did put us at the bottom of the list. And I'm not sure what the reason for that was. One reason I heard that may or may not be true is that since West Concord is accessible, they feel that they don't have to. It's very expensive for them to alter the Concord Depot, and they just don't have the resources. So I think it's going to be extremely difficult. We could get our delegation, the select board will help in any way that you want, but the MBTA has huge problems right now, and they are not going to put us at the top of the list no matter what we do. So
Yeah.
I don't know how far we'll get on that one. And then Laura, your report sounds really interesting, and I'm wondering if I could get a copy or where it is now, because, and I have some suggestions of where it could go besides the website. And you guys named some of these suggestions already, like Visit Concord, Live in Concord, the COA would be a really good one. The Concord Housing Authority, Chamber of Commerce, Economic Vitality Committee. I think all of these folks really want this information. I've been on the Yankee bus and it is really good. I've been on it twice, but nobody knows about it. So thank you for working on it, and let's get the word out on all of that stuff. And then the trolley, I'm very excited about it, and I want to thank everyone who worked on it for your persistence, Erin and your whole team, because at first when Erin and her team came in, the select board was really skeptical, and they had a lot of questions. And a lot of their questions boiled down to, well, you know, it isn't perfect because we haven't done this, this, and this. And I think they finally came around to see that it would be better to do something and get started and get some data. Also, you guys improved it by adding those stops in West Concord. That's a very big improvement. So I'm real excited. I think it'd be fun if the Transportation Committee and the Select Board and whoever, that we all go and write it together one day, like on the first day or something. Could be like a little party.
That's good. Okay. Any public comments? I see none.
I just have a quick question. How accessible is the trolley?
So the trolley is ADA accessible.
It is.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
Okay, good. Good answer. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay. See
Can I-
no public
Oh, can
comments.
I-
Hands up.
Mark Gillis.
Yes.
Where are
Hi,
you, Mark?
sorry. I'm here. Hi, yeah, Mark Gaylis, 62 Prescott Road. Thanks very much. Sounds really good. I've been scanning around on the MBTA accessibility thing, and it's sort of a strange story. I'm not as pessimistic as Ms. Ackerman and some other people have said that MBTA cannot be influenced, and it is really kind of outstanding that if you look at at least their published data about accessibility, the Fitchburg line is like 41% of the stops are not handicap accessible, whereas the other lines where it's 0 or 14% or 5%. So I think it's kind of shameful, and it may be something beyond this committee in particular, but some of what they say are priorities about volume of ridership and that, but I think there's also a question of where, some people would want to come to Concord. I think it's a destination for people coming to Boston. So I think there's a case to be made somehow. I'll think about it some more, but I wouldn't give up on it. I think we ought to be creative and find ways, maybe looking at all the other stations. There's 17 stations, I think, on the Fitchburg line, and 10 of them are accessible and 7 aren't. So maybe by joining with some of the other people who don't have accessibility, we can have a louder voice. But thanks for all this great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. So I think it's time to adjourn, and see you next month.
I'll
second
make a
Tuesday.
motion to adjourn.
Okay. Anyone second? Anyone? see
Second.
here? Thank you. Okay, all in favor, just raise your hands.
You have to do a roll call, sorry.
Oh, I do, okay. Let's see. Dan,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Laura,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. And that's all we have today. Okay, thank you, everybody. See you in a month.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye.